Okay, so today's lesson for interactions in ecosystems, the lesson today is how organisms interact. And firstly, we're going to talk about a niche. It is pronounced niche. You may hear it in some videos and things. It might be pronounced as niche, but the correct pronunciation is niche. All right, so what is a niche? This is the role or characteristic activity that is undertaken by an organism in an ecosystem. So everything that that organism does in that ecosystem. So one organism may fill several different niches. It includes what it eats, where it lives, so its habitat, how it interacts with other organisms in its ecosystem. So for example, we're looking at this white-tailed deer. So let's go through all of its roles or the niche of the white-tailed deer. So it's both a herbivore, but it is also a prey. Habitats include forests with both diverse age structure and plants, so like aspen, oak, and conifers. So they're found also in mixed farmlands and forests. In spring and summer, they will eat grasses, wildflowers, mushrooms, leaves of woody plants. In the fall, they'll eat foods that are higher in carbohydrates, like acorns, fallen fruits, and some crops. In winter, they can eat woody vegetation like buds, twigs, young bark, and conifer foliage. Now, they are a prey as well. So we talked about they are herbivores, but they are also a prey. They're preyed upon by wolves, coyotes, bears, bobcats, and humans. They're also victims to things like vehicle collisions or any other unfortunate circumstances. And then their carcasses, once they die, they will sustain, for example, eagles, ravens, crows, magpies, and other birds and other scavengers, as well as decomposers. All right, let's continue then. All right, so next we're going to go over some key words, key terms for this unit. Firstly is a producer. A producer is defined as they produce their own food energy. So plants and algae, they're able to make their own food. For example, the process of photosynthesis. And then producers, they make life possible for all other organisms on Earth. When we talk about consumers, these are all other organisms that eat the food made by producers. So they cannot make their own food. They have to consume something else. So for example, herbivores, they eat producers. Carnivores, they eat other consumers. Omnivores, they eat both producers and consumers. Predators, these are consumers that kill and eat other animals called prey. So make sure you are familiar with all of those terms. What we're going to do next is take a look at a predator-prey cycle.
That share the same ecosystem can interact with each other and actually provide a feedback loop on each other. And there's many cases of this, but the most cited general example is the case when one population wants to eat another population. And so you have the predator population that likes to eat the prey. So you have a predator and prey interactions. I'm doing the prey in, I guess, a somewhat bloody color, I guess, because, well, they're going to be eaten. So let's just think about how these populations could interact. Let me draw a little chart here that you're probably familiar with by now, where we show how a population can change over time. So the horizontal axis is time, the vertical axis is population. And so let's just, in our starting point, let's say that our prey is starting out at a relatively high point. Let's say we're right there in time. And let's say for whatever reason our predator population is relatively low. So what do we think is going to happen here? Well, at this point, with a low density of predators, it's going to be much easier for them to find a meal, and it's going to be much easier for the prey to get caught. So since it's easier for the predators to find a meal, you can imagine their population starting to increase. But what's going to happen as their population is increasing? Well, it's going to be more likely that the prey is going to get caught. There's going to be more of their hunters around, more of the predators around, so that population is going to start decreasing, all the way to a point where if the population of the prey gets low enough, the predators are going to start having trouble finding food again, and so that their population might start to decrease. And as their population decreases, what's going to happen to the prey? Well, then there's going to be less predators around, so their population might start to increase. And so I think you see what's happening. The predator and prey, they can kind of form this cyclic interaction with each other. And what I've just drawn, this is often known as the predator-prey cycle. And I just reasoned through that you could imagine a world where you could have the cycle between predator and prey populations. But you can also run computer simulations that will show this, and even observational data out in the field also shows this. One of the often cited examples is interactions between the snowshoe hare, which would be the prey in this situation, and the Canadian lynx, which would be the predator in this situation. And you see a very similar cycle to what I just drew, kind of just reasoning through it. And this right here is actual data. You see the passage of time here, and this is a long passage of time. We're starting in the early 1800s, going all the way to the early mid-1900s, so it's roughly 100 years of data that we're showing. And in the vertical axis, you have thousands of animals, and we're plotting both the population of snowshoe hares and Canadian lynx in a certain area on this chart. And as you see, when the prey population is high, when the predator population is high, when we have a lot of the Canadian lynx around, that we see a lower population of the prey, of the hare. But then since you have a low population of the food in this situation, the predator population starts to decrease. So let me draw an arrow here. The predator population starts to decrease, and let me do that same blue color. So the predator population decreases, and as that predator population decreases, well then the prey population increases because there's less folks around to hunt them. So the prey population increases. And you see that the other way around. When the prey population well, maybe we'll show it right over here. And this is real data, so it's not always super clean. But when the prey population is really, really high and the predator population is relatively low, well then the predators say, hey, it's really easy for us to find meals right now. That was kind of that starting point in when I just was reasoning through it. And so their population starts, whoops, what did I do? Let me make sure. So their population starts to increase, and as the predator population increases, well, the prey population is going to decrease. So this is real data showing the snowshoe hare, the prey, and the Canadian lynx, the predator, on over many, many decades to show this predator-prey cycle. What I want to do in this.
All right, so very similar to the video that we just watched. You'll be doing an investigation in your textbook on page 41. The investigation is called What Goes Up Must Come Down. And this investigation in the textbook is also about the predator-prey cycle between the snowshoe hare and the Canada lynx. So what we'll see here is that the niches of the Canada lynx and the snowshoe hare, they're linked together, and the lynx feeds mainly on the snowshoe hares. The snowshoe hares, they eat plants, so whenever there's a lot of plants for snowshoe hares to eat, then more of them are going to survive and more of them are going to reproduce and make more babies. So that means there's more food for the lynx. So the lynx, they have more food because they're going to be feeding on the snowshoe hares. So therefore, more lynx are going to survive and reproduce. But what happens after several years is that there's so many lynx killing the snowshoe hares that now the snowshoe hare population will start to decline or go down. Then the lynxes will not have enough food, and so their numbers will go down. Okay, now because there's less hare, plants are able to grow, and they'll have fewer snowshoe hares around eating them. So therefore, plants are now able to grow, and then more snowshoe hares are born. There's going to be plenty of food now for the snowshoe hares to eat, but now there's less lynx to hunt them, so the snowshoe hare population begins to increase. Then the cycle will continue. Now there's more food for the lynx to eat, so their numbers are going to increase. And this whole cycle, as you'll see in the investigation, this whole cycle lasts about 10 years, and then it starts all over again. All right, so next we're looking at food chains. So a food chain, that's basically a model that's just showing how energy is passing from one organism to another. So in this example, we have the plant, we have the insect eating the plant, the mouse eats the insect, and then we have the owl eating the mouse. So all that we see here is it's just a chain showing the path of energy from one living thing to another. Keep in mind though that we don't see decomposers here like bacteria. They're also necessary in a food chain, but we don't see them here. Notice also the arrows, they're also going from the organism that's eaten to the organism that is doing the eating. All right, so towards the mouth, you can say, of the organism that is eating. Energy is taken in and used as fuel. Some of that energy is going to get released as heat. Some energy gets stored in body tissues. And then other energy that cannot be used gets eliminated as waste. All right, so here is an example of energy flow. So the movement of energy, it's starting from the sun and it's passing on from one organism to the next. So here notice that only about 4% is being stored in tissues. So here in this cow example, about 4%, so 4 kilojoules here, is being stored in the muscle. About 30% here, 33 kilojoules, is being used in activities like breathing, mooing, pumping blood throughout the body, all the activities that the cow needs to survive. Over 60%, so 63 kilojoules here, is being passed out of the body as waste. So here it's 63 kilojoules of it. All right, and that was out of 100 kilojoules that it ate from the grass. All right, so next we are looking at food webs. So this is the network of feeding relationships among organisms because an organism will usually eat more than one food source. So that's why we have food webs. All right, so producers are eaten by many, many different consumers, and then consumers are eaten by more than one kind of predator. So a food web is showing the network of interconnected food chains. You may also see these pyramid of numbers. So this is showing the number of individual organisms at each level of a food chain. And as we go up this pyramid, you'll notice the number of organisms decrease as we go up higher in this, for example, in this food chain. All right, so producers are at the bottom, and then we have the primary consumers, and then the secondary consumers up at the top. There's another type called biomass, and this is looking at the total mass of all the organisms in an ecosystem. And again, the most biomass is normally found in the base of the pyramid, formed by the producers. All right, so in this example, we have the oak tree, then we have the caterpillar, then we have this bird, and then we have the sparrowhawk. All right, and again, it's in a pyramid shape. Okay, there's just a link here for an owl pellet video for the find out activity on page 44. All right, but let's talk about scavengers and decomposers next. So these are the organisms that break down dead material and waste, and as the material breaks down, those stored nutrients, they get released back into the ecosystem. So scavengers include organisms that they feed on dead or decaying plant or animal matter, examples like a magpie, wolverine, and then decomposers, these are organisms that will grow on or in the dead or waste material, absorbing some of the nutrients. So that includes things like bacteria, fungi, mushrooms. All right, so those decomposers and scavengers, they do have a very important role, but they're not always shown in food chains or food webs because they are releasing those nutrients back into ecosystems. Okay, so I'm going to pause here and we'll put on this video.
When we were little, we loved nature shows. One reason was because we didn't have cable, and it was one of the few things we actually got a TV signal for that didn't require you to dance around with the TV antenna for reception. But the other reason was that, of course, it was cool science. It often showed animals that we couldn't see in our own backyard doing some awesome things. But then it would be a little traumatizing when, inevitably, some predator would walk in and gobble the unsuspecting animal up. Truly, action scenes with predators and prey are often shown in nature shows because it's all part of nature's food chains. A food chain starts with a producer. A producer is an organism that is an autotroph, which means that it makes its own food. A plant, for example. The plant is eaten by a primary consumer, this grasshopper here. Consumers are heterotrophs, which means that they need to feed on other organisms. The primary consumer is eaten by a secondary consumer, this frog. The secondary consumer is eaten by a tertiary consumer, this snake, and the food chain can keep going. Notice how the arrows are supposed to point in the direction of the one doing the eating, which makes sense because that's the direction of the energy flow. You can also arrange this same food chain into an energy pyramid. The producers are at the base here, in trophic level 1. They actually contain the most energy. What is crazy to think about is the primary consumers here, in trophic level 2, they actually only store 10% of the energy from the producers. Meaning, let's say the plants here had 10,000 kilocalories. That's an energy unit of energy. Well, the next level here, the primary consumers in trophic level 2, they would only store 1,000 kilocalories of energy. So where did the rest of the energy go? Much of it is lost in heat or undigested. If you go up to the secondary consumers in trophic level 3, that would be only 100 kilocalories of energy. So as you go up each trophic level, it's roughly only 10% of the energy from the trophic level below that will be stored. Back to our food chain. Notice that, like a domino effect, if something is removed, let's say the grasshoppers, you can harm the others because they might not have enough to eat. You really have to consider the relationships among organisms in a food chain. In fact, even if you took out the apex predator in this particular food chain, which is the snake, you could end up with an excessive population of frogs, and so many frogs that it's possible they wouldn't have enough grasshoppers to even support them. You know, this is actually not a very good model because in real life, this snake probably doesn't just eat frogs. It probably eats rabbits and birds too, because an ecosystem doesn't typically have a single food chain. Instead, it has more of a food web. A food web is made up of multiple food chains that interact together. So notice how now we have multiple food chains here tied in with our original to make a food web. The beauty of a food web is that it shows more interactions among a variety of producers and various level consumers. It also can show biodiversity. Biodiversity is the variety of organisms, all types of organisms, living in a given area. The size of the area that we're talking about, as well as the climate of the area, directly affect the biodiversity that is present. Biodiversity can contribute to the sustainability of an ecosystem. What I mean by that is, let's say there was a decrease in the amount of small birds in this food web. Well, it's likely that will be harmful to other organisms. However, it is not the only thing that the snakes feed on. They have other options because of the biodiversity. The snakes also eat rabbits and they eat frogs. So because of this biodiversity, the ecosystem might be more resilient to changes such as these and possibly recover. However, these changes can still have detrimental effects, and it's why it's critical to protect ecosystem biodiversity. High biodiversity has a lot of other benefits. They can include economics, and we'll need another video to really touch on all the benefits of high biodiversity. So if we were to ask you which of our examples here had more biodiversity, our food chain here or our food web, you would definitely want to pick the food web. One last thing, there are some organisms that we left out of our food webs and food chains, but they're kind of a big deal. Decomposers. Decomposers are heterotrophs since they do eat other things, even if the things they're eating are dead. Decomposers include organisms like bacteria and fungus. Technically, if we were to draw them in, then every arrow here would eventually point to them. Well, that's it for the Amoeba Sisters, and we remind you to stay curious.